2.37 million tourists who came last year to India. The main centers for them was Delhi, Agra, Rajasthan, and the mountains of Himalayas. Now, apart from this, the particular state which makes, there is no marginal impact on the potential of a country as a whole. But why? What is the reason that why the potential is, there is a potential, but on a large scale, why the tourists and all over India they are not visiting, except those few pockets?
I think your impression is not correct. Apart from Delhi, Agra, Jaipur, Himalayas and Rajasthan, but perhaps you have in mind when you take Jaipur. What about the state of Goa? What about Kerala? What about Karnataka? What about Maharashtra? All these places have received a very large number of tourists, out of 2.4 million tourists who have come to India. As a matter of fact, Delhi and Bombay are the two major inlet points for the tourists to arrive from overseas by air, and that impression is not correct, that the tourism is confined to only northern part of India or certain states or the well known tourist circuits which have been there for years. It is not true. Kerala has emerged as one of the fastest growing destinations in the last few years, and there is a large number of tourist arrivals in the last 2-3 years, and their percentage increase is sizable in the last 1 year. So, it is not correct. However, it is true that only some states have taken initiative to promote tourism and have benefited therefrom. As you move inwards from the western coast area, I think the awareness about tourism being an important industry as an industry gets diluted, and the amount of interest or the amount of initiative which should come from the state government, which that is where actually the action site is, it is not the central government, it gets reduced, and that is why you will find that as you move in the heartland, for example, take parts of UP, Agra is okay, but the moment you move into the eastern UP, though you have very, very important Buddhist sites, Sarnath, Kushinagar, then you move over to Bihar, Bodh Gaya, Rajgir, and Patna, Patliputra, and all that. They do receive that Buddhist traffic, but the fact of the story is that the number of tourists visiting those areas is certainly lesser than who come to the western coast or the areas which are spread like this. Now, for example, Madhya Pradesh, they have very rich wildlife, they have very rich architecture. You talk of the Mandu, you talk of Gwalior, you talk of Orcha, you talk of Khajuraho. These are the areas which attract a lot of tourists. But partly it also depends on which side the tourists are coming from. Basically, the inflow of tourism in India has been from Europe and US. Number of tourists come down from the eastern side or Southeast Asia or Japan, Australia, etc., has been comparatively less than compared to what comes from the western side. So, naturally, the movement towards the heartland or to the eastern side is comparatively less. That is true, but it is not a fact that there is not an approach, or in reality tourism in overall is not growing all over the country. That is not a correct situation.
But because, why this approach is? Because there should be some reason that why people are not visiting Patliputra or the eastern UP Buddhist places, because there are so many Buddhists coming in India, and of course that's an important center for the Buddhists, like Sarnath.
You see, one problem generally which is there, you see, the tourism is also related to the stage of development to a certain extent, the infrastructure. If some of the states, even though have beautiful tourist sites, do not have the infrastructure in terms of hotel rooms, in terms of roads, in terms of air connections, in terms of rail connections, comfortable, time saving, naturally to that extent a tourist finds it more cumbersome and difficult to travel to that area, even though he may be interested. So, that is where it is necessary that infrastructure related to tourism in this country has to be upgraded.
Now, whom do you found responsible for this, not the proper development of the place?
No, I do not find anybody.
The state government or the central government?
I do not find anybody responsible at the stage of development that this country is. Infrastructure is to take still a lot of time. That is why the central government in the last in the budget year before last has created an infrastructure fund, because that is a felt necessity. You see, the tourism is not something which can grow in isolation. Tourism is dependent on many factors, and one of the important factors is really the infrastructure. Now, the central government has realized and has taken initiative for improving infrastructure. The state government is also taking care of, but it is a high investment, highly what you call the amount of investment which is required is extremely high, and that type of money to be found takes time. Secondly, to construct a road or a railway line, it takes a lot of time.
But sir, there has always been a controversy between state government and the central government, that the support from the central government has not been proportionate to them as in comparison to other states. So, because of course some states are responsible for their development, but they have been claiming that the proper representation is not given to them.
I do not think that is true in the tourism sector, because whatever the amount of money we get from the Planning Commission for promoting tourism related infrastructure, the facilities, we request suggest to the states every year to come up with their own proposals as to what they exactly want to do. We prioritize their requirements and go on releasing funds every year. Therefore, and there has been no complaint as such that we have been favoring a particular state or a set of states against another. That is really not so. Basically, what I find is, it is the key to this problem which you have posed is basically the stage of awareness prevalent on that part of the country about the social and economic benefits of tourism. You see, what happens is, basically tourism is looked at as a leisure activity, as an activity which is peripheral, which is not in the main economic activity stream. And that is why the feeling is that we must look at manufacturing, we must look at agriculture, we must look at other activities in the service sector, but tourism is something, well, it is done, it is fine. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't really happen. But what the Ministry of Tourism now is talking and telling everybody is that tourism is one sector which on per unit of investment creates largest employment. For example, for every 10 lakhs rupees, over 47 jobs are created in tourism sector, whereas agriculture created 44.5%, and manufacturing industry creates only 12.5%. Therefore, if we have to look at the solution to our unemployment problem, redistribution of incomes, particularly development in the rural, backward and remote areas where the tourism products are located, I think tourism is the answer.
Right, sir. Now, is there any coordination between the private sector and the government bodies to boost the tourism?
Yes, very much.
And how?
We have to first note that 99% investment in tourism in this country is from the private sector. Think of the hotel chains, think of the travel agencies, think of the tour operators, think of the tourist transport operators, they are all in the private sector. Now, and there are a number of standalone hotels or accommodation units which are numerous in all over the country, which serve a tourist, which serve a business traveler, they are all in the private sector. And therefore, in spite of the socialist stance which we have had in our economic profile since 1950s, tourism sector is one which has been all the time been in the hands of the private sector largely. And the synergization of the government initiative and the private initiative is marked by the cooperation between the private sector representatives and the Ministry of Tourism. It is the Ministry of Tourism which has provided the classification system to the hotels. It is the Ministry of Tourism has a voluntary scheme for registration of travel agencies, tour operators, transport tour operators, which means that they are a class apart from the ordinary hotels. And because of their classification by the Government of India, by the Ministry of Tourism, a whole set of incentives, fiscal and financial, are made available through the Income Tax Act, through the export import policy, and many other measures which support and promote the private industry in the hospitality sector and otherwise. That is where we are the spokesman really of the private industry as far as their problems are concerned, as far as their support to them is concerned from the Government of India.
So I was talking about the American concept of this resorts, which has become a Desi success story rather. So the middle class people, they have been attracted towards this project. So can you tell me that what is the percentage of people who have accepted this phenomenon?
We have no statistics really to say how many people are joining the timeshare scheme. I think that is what you are talking about. Yes.
Ratio.
We have not conducted any study so far. As a matter of fact, timeshare is as you said, is an American concept where a man can buy a certain amount of days in a year or certain amount of weeks in a year for a particular amount for a particular number of years. Strictly speaking, it does not come in the definition of tourism given by the World Tourism Organization, because you are partly owner of the property through a contract, and anybody who owns a property in which he stays, according to the World Tourism Organization, he is not considered as a tourist. While we have nothing against the time sharing system, actually we welcome, because they provide more accommodation units in this country, and we have a paucity of approved hotel rooms in this country. We welcome that trend, but as far as the tourism ministry is concerned, strictly speaking, so far we have nothing much to do with the timeshare industry.
So do you think that it has a welcome step and it has given some potential?
I said so very emphatically that I do welcome such a thing, because they do provide accommodation units to the people who can pay in advance and stay in those properties for a given number of days in a year. But then, as I said, strictly speaking, from the tourism angle, those people who stay in the accommodation which they have bought through a contract are not tourists, and therefore the subject has not been dealt with as a tourism subject in the ministry so far.
But why do you don't consider them as a tourist? If they are a domestic,
I gave you the answer without your asking me. The answer is that such people do not fall in the category of tourists, and we are promoting tourism.
For the domestic tourists, like people visiting from one state to another, now what facilities the government is thinking of providing them?
No, you see, the point is, as far as we are concerned in the central government, we provide funds to the state governments. We work as a matter of fact catalysts, and the facilities we support and provide funds for are wayside amenities, tourist information centers, refurbishment of monuments, hosting of fairs and festivals, printing of tourism literature, preparation of CD-ROMs, all these things which are related to either hard infrastructure in terms of buildings, in terms of assets, which are to be used by the tourists, rest houses, small yatri nivases, all these things we are supporting. Then, if wherever the state governments have required money for production of literature pertaining to tourism product of their state, we support them.
Right, sir. History is the prime selling point of India abroad. What would I have to say about this?
Well, I would like to word it slightly differently. We are a 5,000-year-old civilization and one of the richest in our heritage, whether be it history, culture, monuments, cuisine, folklore, folk festivals, handicrafts, handlooms, and whatnot. Therefore, the emphasis of Indian tourism has been for almost 50 years on unmatched monuments in this country and basically wildlife, apart from culture, history, folklore. You see, the point is, world is in a dynamic state today. You cannot continue to sell the same product all the time. You have to either repackage it, or you have to come up with new ideas, new things. That is why we are today, while we continue to promote these products, we also are looking at ecotourism, adventure tourism, beach tourism, and many other are what you call the health tourism, and a few such other items we are adding to the product profile, tourism product profile of this country. For example, in Kerala you have that Ayurveda health centers, which is one of the oldest medicine system in the world, and we have also come up with very outstanding beach resorts. Look at Lakshadweep. It is one of the finest examples of beaches being developed, which can match perhaps the best beaches in the world. Very serene, very calm, totally undisturbed, and full of the marine life, and they are attracting very large